Hello, everybody, and welcome to AV 101. In this six-part series, rAVe and NSCA have partnered to give you the basics on the ProAV industry. I'm Tom LeBlanc, Executive Director at NSCA, and today I'll be joined by AV experts who will discuss the fundamentals of projection. But first, a special thank you to our sponsor, TD SYNNEX Visual Solve, who makes this series possible. Now, let's meet our panelists. We have two great panelists today. Um, we have Ramzi Chakra. Ramzi, would you say hello and let people know what company you work for and what you do there?
Yeah, hello everyone. Yes, I work for Epson America, and I'm a product manager with the Epson's large venue projectors.
Well, welcome. So happy to have you here today. All right, and we have Margot Dewaihi. And Margot, if you could say hello and let people know what you do.
Well, thanks so much, Tom, and great to see you, Ramsey, as well. So my name is Margot Dewaihi, and for about 2 decades, I covered the audiovisual and IT industries as an editor, an analyst, and a reporter. And I'm mostly found these days in the higher education space. I lead the editing and publishing track at Franklin Pierce University, based in New Hampshire. And I also teach writing and multimedia and multimodal storytelling. So projection is a fundamental part of my daily life. I see how the students interact with it. I'm there if there's a glitch or a hiccup when the systems are not working as they should be. And so I see projection from all the angles, from the end user perspective, what it's like to not be able to find a remote when you need it in the classroom. You have a guest speaker, coming in, or someone on Zoom. And then I also have covered the industry, and I've seen a lot of the iterations from point to point connections, the analog sunset of, I think it was 2012, and, through the AV over IP revolution and evolution. I'm really passionate about this category. I think there's still so much to learn and so many opportunities. So I'm just really excited to learn from you all and share and maybe have some spirited debates and conversations. So thanks for having me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. And it's great to kind of hear you explain, how you work with projection, within your job. Because I think for the folks in the audience, that's one of the dots that we need to connect for them. Like, how does one work within the projection industry? I want to get that from you, Ramsey, as well. Can you talk a little bit about like all right, well, just real simply, how do you work with projection in your job?
So I'm as a product manager, I'm more on the marketing end, product marketing. So product managers tend to be the product expert at any company, especially so at Epson. So we talk about with our engineers for future roadmap. We work on trade shows like the Infocom show that just wrapped up. We work on promotions. We work closely with sales. We work on pricing. We often meet with end users to see what their pain points are, what they're looking for in future products. So it really covers quite a whole spectrum of marketing, sales, product development for projection.
Okay. Yeah, there are so many different ways that you can work with projection in this integration industry that we're all peripherally, in some way a part of. All right, I want to I want to create more context for the audience a little bit. So, Margot, one of the things I was thinking about is we live in this world in which video is everywhere. I mean, you look
Yeah.
in any direction, you can see a video screen, and it's almost like you become numb to it. Like
Yeah.
years ago, it was like, hey, look, there's a video screen. Now it's like, whatever, I see that all the time. But projection video, has that risk of being taken for granted. So what I wanted you to do is, can you give us an example of how projection does make a big impact on something, whether it be business, whether it be our ability to communicate or our ability to entertain and, grab attention? In other words, help us to get excited about projection. What would you like to say there?
Yeah, I mean, that's the perfect springboard because I feel like we are so screen fatigued, and projection really has an opportunity to distinguish itself. And there are, of course, venues and applications and use cases where only projection really works in terms of the budget, the technical considerations, and the users that are going to be in the space and interacting with this audiovisual and integrated experience. So I feel like the ways to get excited about, projection start with, how do we want to inform, engage, and keep the people moving through this built environment with us? How do we deepen the experience for them? So case in point, I'm here at the Educator Symposium at the Kansas City Art Institute of the Kansas City, Missouri. And we were just in an auditorium, capacity 250. There are screens, as you walk in terms of the lobby, they're flat panels that are super bright, that can compete with the daylight pouring through. But then you walk into this lovely, stately, august auditorium, and, we have this massive projection screen and some creative applications of, projection, of course, long throw projection. And there was no, dimming option. So you're either plunged, completely in darkness with a beautiful, bright image, but, had some people fumbling around as they were trying to take notes. Of course, we have backlit screens on our phones. But when we think of this high impact wow factor of projection in the spaces that we need them the most, we want to think more broadly about the whole ecosystem. What is required to make this projection work? So I'm really excited about these large venues, the projection mapping artistic experiences that we see very often, from Epson, and artists that can transform, the Parliament building or a campus, into a canvas using the 360-degree warping blending, edge blending from projection systems. But that real expertise in pulling all of the elements together in terms of, user experience start to finish. What is the mood like? The atmosphere? Is the lighting integrated? The motorized screen, etc. So I feel like for as excited as I get about large venues, and particularly in the education space, to fully maximize it, to fully give the students, in my case, or attendees if it's a conference like this, the best experience possible, thinking more broadly and richly about every element that is connected is going to offer that, fundamentally improved and exceptional experience. And so that's why I really applaud what you're doing with NSCA and rAVe is, going just ground up, whether you're coming from the IT space, maybe you have more of an expertise with audio, maybe, you're coming from your experience miking folks, before an event and moving into projection. It is a really big picture engagement. So thinking, not just about a projector that is throwing an image onto a wall, thinking about audio. Sorry, there's a little bit of noise. So I'm going to just mute for a second. And, I could say so much more about it, but, big picture thinking, these big spaces have the best impact, but they have their own, unique challenges. So we can dig into some of those as well.
Oh, absolutely. And, Ramsey, I was going to ask you the same question about, like what would get folks excited about projection? And I think Margot kind of queued you up in a way when she was talking about projection mapping. All right. So I want you to talk about projection mapping. First, I want you to define it for folks in the audience. But the reason I think this is a really interesting topic for people who are trying to figure out what they want to do with their careers is it's a great marriage of engineering and creativity and art. It's definitely exciting, especially for somebody who, thinks of technology in a creative way. Can you talk a little bit about projection mapping?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the reasons, or the biggest reason I enjoy this job so much is that kind of interplay with a lot of creative people who are working with projection. I think the way projection is just one of the only forms that projects light, I think it really excites artists and creative production companies, because there's so much you can do. You're not bound to a frame. You don't have to physically take the actual display and mount it anywhere. So with that freedom, you can project on the outside of buildings, you can project on three-dimensional objects, you can create a very immersive space without having to put on virtual reality glasses. So it really is a breakthrough display technology that really allows certain things that no other display technology can do. The term mapping is a bit of a catch-all phrase, but it typically covers when you are projecting on a surface that's not flat. So whether it's typically an object or there's a slight curvature, it can also mean more than one projector. So you have maybe, you're in an immersive space or a super wide screen that you've seen. That requires multiple projectors to create that size and that detail. So the mapping also includes what's called edge blending. So you don't know when one projector ends and the other one begins. So all of that, comes together to make some really exciting spaces.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to make the very rigid transition from talking about creativity to defining some terms, because I do think it's important for folks in the audience to just have a little bit of familiarity with some of the terms used around this world of projection. So we don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but Ramsey, why don't we start with throw distance? What is meant by throw distance?
So a throw distance or throw ratio, that's basically really something that tells you about where to place the projector. So it's basically the ratio of the width of the screen to the distance to the projector. So if you have for example, a 5-foot wide screen and you have a throw ratio of 1, then the lens to screen is 5 feet. So that kind of helps determine where to place the projector. And then most all projectors have a zoom lens. So with the zoom, you may have a projector that says, 1.2 to 2.0 a throw ratio projector. So then that means that if you have a 5-foot wide screen, you can go from 5 feet away from that screen to 2 feet away from it. So that's really all it is. And then if the fixed lens projector doesn't really allow you to place it where you want, then you have interchangeable lens projectors. And then by changing the lens, you change the ratio. So you can then put it with the same size display. You can put it all the way in the back of the auditorium, for example, with a certain lens, or an ultra short throw lens, bring it right up to the screen and still have that same size display.
Okay. How about contrast ratio? Can you quickly explain that to the audience?
Yeah, so contrast ratios, you probably heard that term before. It's also used for flat panel displays, your TV at home. So it's really just the difference between the brightest portion and the darkest portion, that range that the display can show.
Okay. Margot, let's talk a little bit about different types of projection. Can you quickly define what we mean by large venue projection? You alluded to it before.
So yeah, I mean, now I didn't actually go to InfoComm this year as well, so I'm gonna maybe deflect some of the more highly technical and most recent questions over to my fabulous technical colleague Ramsey as well. But so for a large venue, you're talking about in terms of resolution, you have 4K to 8K, you want a higher resolution image, and just that horsepower that can give you the largest image possible. So obviously if you're at home and if you have a home projection system, you could have something that's not quite as bright. You have something that's maybe for an apartment or for a home system, but large venue there's a panoply of different kinds of projectors that you can choose in terms of the actual light engine. So maybe we can talk a little bit more about that as well. But thinking about seating capacity, space requirements, we'll bring up some more of that criteria as well.
Okay. And also, I just want people to understand, like these little terms like rear projection. Instead of having a projector that's projecting a screen forward, it's quite the opposite, Ramsey. Could you quickly explain that?
Yeah, so rear projection is an often used installation where, like you said, the projector is placed behind the screen. The screen has to be a special type that works for it's a rear projection type screen. And the benefit of that, obviously, is the projector is hidden. You're not going to get shadows if someone walks really close to the screen. And typically, you'd have a specific type of lens so that the projector is not too far away from the back of that screen.
Okay. How about 3D projection?
So yeah, 3D projection. Typically, when something is called a 3D projector, it probably means it has a 3D feature which allows it to work with active glasses. So it'll output in such a way in sync with active glasses, which will which have a built-in switching polarizer. Other than that, most any projector can be used for 3D, but it gets more complex in terms of installation.
Okay. All right. That's enough defining terms. That was fun, right? So we'll get into some of the the more interesting discussions around projection. And Margot, one of the things that we started to get into was sort of the creative element around projection and the different things that can be done. But there are a lot of business and educational, very practical reasons why it makes good business sense for an organization to invest in projection, and it makes really good business sense for for the companies that provide technology solutions to be able to provide these solutions to, for instance, businesses and universities. Now, you have a lot of familiarity with how universities, higher education schools work within projection. Can you talk a little bit in general? What's going on in terms of demand for and use of projection in the higher ed world?
So I think that the real interest right now is in these twin concerns of how do we make a campus, as inclusive, welcoming, and radically adaptable as possible, but also really bring the branding element, the loyalty, the community, so that when you go back to the University of Pittsburgh or Boston University or wherever you might be, that you feel like you're part of this larger cohesive force. So when you think about lobby experiences, or you think about again these kind of dynamic forums where you have large venues and auditoriums, obviously you want the brightest projection possible, but we're seeing that it has to be able to work really quickly and quite seamlessly with other systems that might be in play. So in the classrooms that I teach in Franklin Pierce, we have both a projection system and flat panel displays, in the classroom. So you have both. So if you have a system where you're, zooming in a guest from, London, for example, and they're on, you want connectivity between all the touch points, and you want it to be dead simple. So the user interface has to be, extremely intuitive for anyone who's coming in. So the demand is that hybridity and that cohesion as well. So you want systems that can speak to each other. So standardization is actually really important, and the ability to kind of scale. So maybe we're able to roll out 100 classrooms in the next 2 years, but the 5-year plan is, full 500 classrooms. So scalability is what users, in the higher ed community are really looking at, as well as, meeting budget. We all know that it's a difficult time right now. COVID was an absolute blow, it was really detrimental, and there were a lot of deleterious aspects for, higher ed stakeholders. So when they're thinking about the future, it's about, getting students excited to come back to school giving them these wow factors, giving them those moments that say, I'm glad I'm here. You know, I'm not sitting in my, you know, my parents' house again, or in sharing the computer with the younger brother or sister. Like, we're back on campus. It's a new day. It's a new opportunity. And so higher end, you know, projection systems that are easy to use, but that can also work with the other elements that are in the classroom. They just make it so much more enticing and give many more reasons for the folks who are doing the specification work, or if you have a higher ed or an ed tech committee, you know, there's just all these opportunities to say, we're investing in something that's going to elevate that student experience, elevate the teacher experience for everyone. So it's very real. You know, schools are still hurting. They're still adapting. They're still kind of coming back from the pandemic and finding their footing. You want to see people investing in the future. So for folks that are kind of tuning in and still learning a lot about projection, or maybe thinking about moving up the career ladder, educating, you know, finding those ways to say, like, how do we use this as an educational tool, you know, to really benefit the whole university more broadly. And then it applies to the corporate sector as well. We're seeing, you know, projection more spaces. Like I said, you know, lobby experience is one, but of course the training rooms, the, you know, spaces where you might need a larger format than flat panels, you know, and thinking about prices. So they're just like new and evolving opportunities, but those kind of standard stalwart, you know, places where projection has always been, you know, the dominant display technology will continue to hold that space. So just finding those ways to make it a more broad appeal, and so that no one can say no to, you know, and especially if it comes in on budget or under budget.
Excellent. Now, Ramsey, I thought Margot did a really nice job there of describing, you know, kind of the business and educational impact that, you know, projection can make. And, you know, for folks in the audience, I think it's our responsibility to kind of connect the dots a little bit and say, like, okay, well, if I want to play a role in providing those solutions, what are the career opportunities that are out there for me? And, you know, it's hard to picture if you don't already work in the integration industry, or if you're just on the, you know, the peripheral of the industry. Can you talk a little bit? Can you help folks in the audience kind of visualize what are the types of jobs that involve working in projection? What are the types of companies that they would be working for? Maybe try to connect the dots a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's obviously you know, working with a system integrator, right? And then they're going to have roles which are related, have to do with projection. Obviously, the different size of the system integrator, the more focused, more specific that role is. So, for example, if you're talking about, you know, the top 15, top 20 system integrators, they may have 1, 2, or 3 specialized employees that are just working on projection projects. So they're looking at projectors placement, mapping, lensing, specifying, all that. And then a little bit of smaller company, you might be just part of the design engineering portion of that company, where they're doing projection, but they're not just specialized on it. They'll do projector, they'll do flat panels, they'll do the whole other deal. So that part probably requires, you know, obviously working with CAD programming and whatever the project site is, getting in that 3D render of the project site and being able to place and specify projectors, the right brightness, the right lens, all that. Also, the same system integrator, you might be part of the installation team. So that could be purely going to the project site and installing the projection and the screens. And then you would have post-installation, it might be a different team that goes in and actually you know, programs and optimizes the system, the entire AV system, whether it's the control system, the media playback to the projectors, And then obviously you turn on the projectors, set them up, make sure the picture quality is right, align it to the screen. So those are probably the three related to projection: installation, uh, setup, and design engineering.
Excellent. And folks in the audience, just to make sure they understand what we mean by a system integration company. I mean, these are companies that um, don't necessarily manufacture our products, but they design solutions for customers. And these customers could be, corporate customers like businesses, office buildings. They could be higher education facilities or retail or really just any market.
Right.
And they would design systems and provide an integrated solution. And that just doesn't work unless you have professionals on board who know how to work with projection.
Absolutely. Oh.
Now, Margot, one of the other things I wanted to do was kind of challenge the folks in the audience to recognize within themselves if they have characteristics and maybe education or experience that might be an early sign that they might excel in a career that involves projection. Does anything spring to mind in terms of something that they should recognize within themselves?
Are you your family's help desk? Or is there somebody always asking you why how you can airplay, or why the printer isn't working? If you are your family's tech support, projection and AV is your future. And beyond that, of course, creative problem solving. If you like that moment of right before a meeting begins, right before the conference is about to begin and the projector is not working, if that doesn't make you break out into a cold sweat and you're not like hit or with a fight or flight response, then that ability to say, okay, let's go through all the steps. First of all, are the batteries in the remote working? That kind of logical mind, if you like to problem solve, but also thinking outside of the box. It's kind of a unique space to be in AV and IT, because it's more of a sensibility. It's like a can-do sensibility. So I've worked with so many people over the years as an editor and a reporter, but also, on that front line of using these systems and helping the universities look at new solutions that come out, going to the different shows and test driving them and all of the fun stuff, is just that sensibility of like, let's make this experience unforgettable. Let's make this incredible. And if you get just really jazzed up and really excited about these tools, these ways of bringing people together and making memories and creating unforgettable experiences, then this is absolutely something you want to explore. And I think a lot of people still don't really know that AV is actually an incredible career path. There's so many opportunities. And, we have our wonderful industry alliances like NSCA and Infocom and, higher ed groups that will give tremendous training. You can get certified and go, really take deep dives into the categories that you're really fascinated by. And I also wanted to add to that in terms of the job possibilities, just that AVIT manager, or, in the case of my world, like a campus technology specialist. So you might have a generalist approach where you do the audio, you're miking folks before an event, but you're troubleshooting the projector. You're making sure that the lighting system is working. So there's a little bit of crossover. Facilities management, there's a little bit of crossover with IT. You might even be working within the IT department. So there are a tremendous amount of opportunities, depending on really where you want to take it. There's sky is the absolute limit.
Awesome. All right. So we're starting to get to the point where I want to wind down, but I want to circle back to excitement. We talked about getting excited about this product category early in the conversation, and I think that we would be remiss if we don't leave the audience with sort of that impression of why this product category can be, you know, something it's not just all about, you know, like components and, you know, and connections. It's something that can be really exciting and leave a lasting impression on an audience. So what I wanted to do, Ramsey, maybe starting with you, is I wanted to get you to talk about one project that was, you know, that kind of leaves that impression in your head, and get you to describe, you know, like a project that will get people in the audience kind of excited about this category of projection. Can you think of an awesome projection project that you can describe?
Yeah, I think there are several. The one that kind of came close to my heart kind of mixed visuals and music. So a creative studio we work with out of Boston, Masery Studios. They did some work in Scottsdale, Arizona for one of the festivals they have there. And they did a really interesting mix of audio and visuals and a large scale visuals. So they created an app where people could go, and almost like a drum machine sound type tap app where you can go and just kind of create soundscapes and it would generate a visual. And these sounds, they were created and picked up by sampling some of the natural sounds of the city and the environment in Scottsdale. So there are all these ambient sounds. So you create these beautiful soundscapes, very ambient, and it creates this beautiful kind of image. And then they were taking these images and projecting them onto the side of several buildings in Scottsdale. And so it was this really great way of where you can have people globally, not even just in the US, who are working on this app, creating this sound, and then it's curated and it's projecting onto these massive, 6-7 story buildings, the sides of those buildings with this color. So it's really quite an engaging way. And this all happened during the height of the COVID pandemic. So it was still, people were able to kind of interact, with everyone kind of keeping that social distance we had back then, but still create this massive artwork.
See, that's a great example, because it's a great, marriage of all these different disciplines coming together. Right. And it just, it really says a lot about what you can do with this technology. Margot, any examples come to mind?
So many. And again, I really got chills like thinking about that, because I love that studio. And again, that's a great convergence of the technical and the creative. And what comes to mind is a project that I saw at ISC probably 2 years ago. And I apologize, I don't recall the name of the company, the creative studio that created it. But basically it was using projection mapping to create in a town square in Amsterdam, essentially what it would feel like if it was flooded. And so using the projection mapping, it basically, you were ensconced in this extraordinary blue light, but it felt, like this otherworldly immersive experience where you're thinking more deeply about the water level rising. And it was social comment and, a creative expression to think more deeply about climate change. So not only, you're out of the house, you're out, you're engaging with the community, and you're having this extreme experience that is both artful, it's educational, and confrontational. So people are being brought together by these, really remarkable systems. But you're also, having these touch points with a mobile app. There's more to learn, there are ways to get involved. So it was almost like a call to action, and projection mapping was at the heart of it, to think more deeply about climate change. And it literally wouldn't have been possible without both the creative application, the software, the content, and then these remarkable agile projectors, which, there were multiple. So it was using that edge blending system. But without projection, you just wouldn't have had this opportunity to all come together. So it's just that, again, getting away, as you mentioned, as you open, Tom, there are screens everywhere. They're in the back of taxis, they're at kiosks. We have no shortage of screens, but it's that the wow factor, the ability to come together and have these shared experiences, that's where projection really shines, and you cannot replace it with anything. There's really nothing else, that can quite, do that with that level of impact.
Yeah, I mean, I love that description. It really illustrates that, projection is a great platform for somebody, and, to pose a challenge to them to say, like, can you make an impact? Can you use this to make an impact on whoever the audience is? And I think that could be really exciting in terms of a career opportunity. I want to end with next steps, for folks in the audience. And, Ramsey, I guess if you were new to AV and if you wanted to learn more about projection, can you think of any resources or anything or initial places to go for education that you would recommend?
Projectorcentral.com is a good source for a lot of information about projection. YouTube is also a good place. There's a lot of tutorials up there that talk about the basics of projection, screens, and all that. Of course, a lot of the industry magazines have online, or subscribing to them will kind of give you a good view as well. So there's quite a bit of resources, and it depends really on your interest. If you're looking at it from a artist, being a creative and using it for your to project your art. There's a lot out there on YouTube. You can specific software and applications that people discuss how they're doing it. And ourselves, Epson, we upload tutorials as well on some of the basics of projection and even edge blending and those sort of applications.
Excellent. And then Margot, how about you? Any next steps that you would recommend?
Yeah, I would say look at the case studies. Epson has a ton of case studies, NSCA, with all of your members. Look at what people have done. It will blow your mind, and it will inspire you to think about, what was fascinating about it, how did it work, what were the technical requirements, components, and, how can we raise the bar? How can we level up next time? So I would say those case studies are a great place to start. They were always the most fun for me to write because you could also interview the integrators, the designers, the end users, and then also the participants, the people who've been changed, by these great experiences with projection. And then, of course, all of the industry publications like rAVe and Commercial Integrator, and the future publications like AV Technology, where I used to edit for a number of years. And getting to chat with people at the trade shows is also incredible, and just saying, like, what worked for you, and then thinking about that next level, how can we bring interactivity into projection, and just where do you want to make your mark? And if you have something you're really passionate about, maybe it's IT, so thinking about that, bringing a projection system into the IP network. And again, it's just really the sky's the limit.
Well, so very well said, both of you. And I just want to thank both of you so much for joining me today and helping us to educate the audience on, the fundamentals of projection. And, Ramsey, how about if folks want to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
Probably LinkedIn is best. Just search for my name, Ramsey Chakra, or I think it's linkedin.com/n/rchakra is the full address.
Well, thank you so much for everything you contributed
Sure.
to. Margot, how about if folks want to get in touch with you?
Yeah, definitely through LinkedIn, and you can find some of the case studies that I've written over the past years. A lot of them are about projection, and a bunch of them are up on LinkedIn. So yeah, just Margot, MARGOT, DOUAIHY on LinkedIn. I'd be thrilled to connect with you. AV's always one of my passions, and I look forward to hearing about what you're up to. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, it was our pleasure. And, also thanks to all the folks in the audience for joining us. As for me, you can find me on LinkedIn and on Twitter at LeBlanc Tom. Be sure to check out nsca.org and ravepubs.com for all the latest ProAV industry news and research. Thanks again to our sponsor, TD SYNNEX VisualSolve, who makes this series possible. I'm so glad you joined us today. Be sure to check out our next session, Digital Signage 101, which will be hosted by me on August 1st. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.